Hey, son, picture a bathroom counter in 1982. A row of glass bottles catching the morning light, a hairdryer humming on its hook, and the faint smell of aqua net drifting down the hallway like something permanent and familiar. If you enjoy this kind of quiet trip back in time, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always love knowing who's here, because there are things worth wondering about. What did a Tuesday morning actually feel like for a woman getting ready in 1983? What did her vanity look like? What products lined the edge of her sink, and in what order did she use them? What did she hear on the radio while she pressed her hair? What did her mother teach her that her mother's mother had taught before that? What did it mean to look put together back then? And who decided what that even meant? How many unspoken rules governed the way a woman presented herself before she ever walked out the front door? It's 1982 now. The bathroom light is on. The coffee is percolating on the stove downstairs. And she has exactly 40 minutes before the day begins. Let's start at the vanity. It sits against the bedroom wall, usually near the window, sometimes tucked into an alcove just off the master bathroom. And in 1982, it is the most personally organized surface in the house. Not the kitchen counter, not the desk in the den. The vanity. Everything on it has a place, and everything in its place means something. The mirror is rimmed in light bulbs if she is lucky, or it is a plain oval frame propped against the wall, with a smaller magnifying mirror beside it, for the close work. The surface itself is covered with a cloth runner, something her mother embroidered, or something she picked up at a linen sale downtown. Pale cotton or lace edging, now slightly stained at the corners from years of bottles being set down wet. She does not notice the stains anymore. They are part of the furniture the way the furniture is part of the room. The bottles are arranged with a logic that is entirely her own. Taller things at the back. Frequently used things at the front right, where her dominant hand reaches without looking. The compact sits beside the eyeshadow palette beside the blush, and the brushes stand upright in a ceramic cup that her youngest made in art class in 3rd grade, and that she has used every morning since. It is chipped at the rim. She would not replace it. There is a small tray, usually oval, usually silver-toned or gold, that holds the things that need to stay together. The tweezers, the small scissors, the eyelash curler with its rubber pad gone slightly soft. These are the precision instruments of the morning, and they live in the tray the way surgical tools live in a tray, each one serving a specific and irreplaceable purpose. Perfume bottles line the back edge like a small city skyline. Some are nearly empty and kept anyway, either for sentiment or for the last few drops that still live in the bottom and can be coaxed out by tipping the bottle upside down and waiting. A woman in the 1980s does not throw away a perfume bottle until it is completely, undeniably gone. The bottle itself is part of the pleasure. The weight of the glass, the particular shape of the stopper. There is something about this surface that functions almost like a private altar. The rest of the house belongs to everyone. The kitchen belongs to whoever is hungry. The living room belongs to the television and the people who gather around it. But the vanity belongs to her alone, and the 20 or 30 minutes she spends there each morning are the only minutes in the day that are entirely hers before the day lays its full weight on her shoulders. Her daughter has stood at the doorway and watched her work. Her husband knows not to ask questions while she is sitting there. The phone can ring, and sometimes it rings, and sometimes she lets it ring. The vanity time is not negotiable. It is not selfishness. It is maintenance of the self in a decade that has very specific ideas about what a woman should look like when she steps outside, and she has made a private peace with those ideas long ago. The products are not expensive mostly. Some are drugstore brands she has used for so long that she would feel genuinely lost if they were discontinued. One or two things are department store, splurges from a birthday or a Christmas, kept slightly longer than the others. The distinction between drugstore and department store is not about quality so much as feeling. The department store jar feels like a small luxury on an ordinary Tuesday morning, and ordinary Tuesday mornings can use all the luxury they can get. When she sits down at that mirror and the light comes in from the window at the right angle, and the house is still quiet enough that she can hear the birds outside, this is the most composed moment of her entire day. The vanity is where she assembles herself before the world gets her, and she takes that assembly seriously. Before the makeup, before the hair, before a single thing is added to the face, something has to be taken away. It is still early. The house is quiet, and she is standing at the sink with a jar of cold cream in her hand, going through the first step of a routine that probably began when she was 14 years old, and watching her mother do the same thing in the same light. Cold cream has been around since the early 20th century, and by the 1980s it is so thoroughly embedded in the beauty routines of American women that most could not tell you when they started using it. They just always have. The jar is usually white. The lid is usually gold-toned. The smell is faintly floral and faintly medicinal in a way that is comforting rather than clinical. The way certain smells belong so completely to a particular place and time that encountering them years later stops you cold in a drugstore aisle. She opens the jar and scoops a small amount with her fingertips. The cream is white and thick, and it warms the moment it meets her skin. She works it in small circles across the forehead first, then down the nose, across both cheeks, along the jaw, under the chin. This is not rushed. Rushing the cleanse means the day begins slightly wrong, slightly off balance, and she knows this from experience. The cleanse is where the day is set up properly. The cream is removed with a tissue, one for each side of the face, pulled in an upward motion, because her mother told her that dragging downward would pull the skin, and she has never once dragged downward since that conversation. The tissue comes away with yesterday's residue, the faint ghost of last night's powder, the mascara that the makeup remover did not entirely finish. The cold cream catches what everything else misses. If there is a morning ritual that ties the decades women together across every neighborhood and zip code, it is probably this one. The cold cream cleanse is not glamorous. It does not appear in the magazine advertisements, which prefer to show women with glowing skin and finished faces, not women with white cream worked into their T-zones at 6:45 in the morning. But it is real, and it is daily, and it is the foundation of everything that comes after. Some women follow the cold cream with a toner, a small bottle of something pale gold or clear that smells sharply of alcohol and astringent herbs. She soaks a cotton ball, the flat round kind that come in a bag of 100, and presses it gently across the skin. The cotton ball comes away slightly pink, and she does not think much about this. This is simply what clean skin looks like after a night in it. The sink smells of soap and the cream and faintly of the perfume that drifted in from the bedroom. The bathroom mirror is slightly fogged from the shower her husband took 20 minutes ago. She wipes a clear circle with the side of her fist and looks at herself in that circle. Just her face, unstyled, unfinished, unvarnished, for a brief moment before the morning's work begins. It is the kind of private look that women of this era do not necessarily talk about. The unfinished face in the fogged mirror. There is something quietly honest about it. That pause before presentation. That moment of being nobody's version of yourself except your own. Then she reaches for the moisturizer, and the quiet moment passes, and the assembly of the day begins in earnest. The foundation comes next, and in the 1980s, foundation is not subtle. It is not meant to disappear into the skin the way modern formulas try to. It is meant to be a canvas, a deliberate starting point, the first visible decision of the morning. She squeezes a small amount onto the back of her hand, or dabs it from a compact, and she begins. The shade is an exact science, arrived at through years of trial and error and at least 2 or 3 regrettable purchases of the wrong undertone. She knows her number the way she knows her dress size, by heart, without needing to look. At the drugstore, she can walk to the display and pull the right bottle without holding it up to her wrist in the fluorescent light the way younger women do. The shade is hers. It has been hers for a while. Foundation in 1982 is applied with the fingers or a damp sponge, the kind that comes in a small triangular shape or a flat round disc and lives in a Ziploc bag in the makeup drawer, replaced every few months when it gets too dense with product to be useful anymore. The sponge technique is a particular skill. Too much pressure and the foundation streaks. Too little and it sits on top of the skin rather than blending into it. She has the pressure calibrated exactly. The coverage is full. This is important to understand because it represents a philosophy about what a face is supposed to look like, which is essentially that it is supposed to look finished. The ideal face in the 1980s is not a face that appears to have had nothing done to it. It is a face that has been done, and done well, with each element intentional and present. Foundation is the first element. It evens the canvas and sets the tone for everything above it. She goes under the eyes, along the jaw, down the neck slightly, blending the line where the face meets the air so there is no visible tide mark when she turns in the light. The tide mark is a failure state. She has seen it on other women, and she does not allow it on herself. The neck gets a quick pass every morning, a small additional squeeze of product, just enough to keep the colors consistent. The smell of liquid foundation is particular to this decade, a slightly powdery, slightly synthetic fragrance that belongs entirely to the genre of 1980s drugstore cosmetics. CoverGirl, Revlon, Maybelline. The bottles are the same shape they have been for years. The pumps sometimes stick. The shade names are things like Ivory Beige and Natural Buff and Warm Sand. Names that suggest neutrality and naturalness, while the product itself is anything but invisible. After the liquid comes the setting powder, pressed or loose, applied with a large brush or a round puff, and this is the step that locks everything in place. She presses the puff against her nose and forehead and chin with a patting motion, not a sweeping one, which would disturb what the liquid already built. The powder is what makes the face look finished rather than wet. It is what allows everything that comes next to go on cleanly and stay there. The whole process takes perhaps 5 minutes. To watch it is to understand something about the relationship this generation of women had with effort, with standards, and with the quiet discipline of daily maintenance. The foundation is not vanity. It is infrastructure. And without it, nothing else builds properly. There is a small brown pencil on the vanity, worn down to a particular angle that fits the curve of her hand exactly. The eyebrow pencil in the 1980s is not a tool of subtlety. It draws a clean, firm arch, sharp at the tail, following a shape that was fashionable and deliberate, and nothing at all like the full brush brows that came later. The arch is everything. A well-drawn arch in 1982 reads as polished, composed, alert. It lifts the eye visually and signals that the face has been attended to with care. The arch begins above the inner corner of the eye, rises to its peak at an angle that corresponds roughly to where a straight line from the outer edge of the nostril would intersect the brow bone, and then tapers into a clean tail that ends above the outer corner of the eye. This geometry has been internalized through repetition until it requires no thought at all. She starts with light, short strokes at the inner corner, building the color gradually, then follows the natural shape of the brow to the peak before drawing the tail with a single, confident stroke. The pencil point is kept sharp because a dull point means a smudged line, and a smudged line is not the effect she is going for. Precise is the word. She is going for precise. Some women use a brow brush after the pencil to soften the strokes slightly, blending the product into the existing brow hairs so the line is sharp but not drawn on in an obvious way. Other women prefer the clean pencil line exactly as it lands, with no softening, no blending, the arch as crisp as a ruled margin. Both are acceptable in this decade. Both are common. The distinction is a matter of personal preference and possibly the decade of the woman's birth, older women often going crisper, younger women allowing more softness. The brows of the 1980s are thin. This is a continuation of a trend that began in the earlier part of the century, when brows were plucked to near invisibility and penciled back on in a dramatic arch. By the 80s, the style has moderated slightly, but thin is still the ideal, and most women of this era maintain that thinness with weekly or twice-weekly plucking at the vanity mirror with the magnifying side turned forward and a pair of slant-tipped tweezers in hand. The tweezers live in the vanity tray alongside the eyelash curler. The plucking happens in good light, usually morning, usually after the shower when the pores are open and the hair comes away more easily. She plucks from underneath the brow only, cleaning the stray hairs that would disrupt the line, never taking from above because that is how you lose the arch, and the arch is the whole point. There is something almost meditative about the eyebrow pencil step. It requires focus. The hand must be steady. The eye must be critical without being cruel. She looks at her own face in the mirror with the particular detached assessment of someone doing skilled work on a familiar surface. And she draws the line. And when the line is right, she moves on. Decades later, the thin, arched brow of the 1980s will become shorthand for the era, reproduced in photographs and referenced in fashion writing as distinctly of its time. But in 1982, standing at the mirror with the pencil in her hand, it is not a cultural artifact. It is just Tuesday morning, and the line needs to be drawn. It is one of the most recognizable images of the decade. The sweep of blue across the lid, sometimes powdery and pale, sometimes deep as a bruise, almost always accented with a darker crease. Blue eyeshadow in the 1980s was not a mistake. It was a statement. It was the color of confidence worn somewhere between the lash line and the brow, and nearly every woman at some point opened a compact and reached for it. The palette sits on the vanity, a pressed powder compact with a small rectangular mirror inside the lid. Some compacts hold a single color. Others hold 3 or 4 in a graduated arrangement, lightest at the top, darkest at the base. The lightest shade goes on the brow bone as a highlight. The mid-tone covers the lid. The darkest shade goes into the crease, that soft hollow above the eyelid. That, when correctly defined, makes the eye appear larger and more dimensional than it actually is. The technique she uses was taught to her at a Merle Norman counter when she was in her early 20s, demonstrated on her own face by a woman in a white coat who explained the 3-shadow method with the confidence of someone describing a reliable recipe. Light at the top, medium on the lid, dark in the crease. Blend where they meet so there is no hard line. The advice has not changed in the years since, and neither has the general approach. Blue is the dominant color, not because every woman chose blue arbitrarily, but because blue was what the magazines showed, what the counters stocked in the greatest variety, and what the light on the lid did in a way that other colors simply did not replicate. The cool tone of blue contrasted with the warm tones of foundation and blush in a way that felt balanced and intentional. The eye was the cool note in a warm palette, and the effect, in 1982, read as sophisticated and current. She applies the lid color with a small foam applicator, the kind attached to a plastic handle that bends at a slight angle for better control. She pats rather than sweeps, building the color in layers, going back for more product to deepen the shade near the lash line. The crease color goes on with a narrower brush, worked into the socket with small back-and-forth strokes while her mouth opens slightly, which lifts the brow and relaxes the lid and makes the crease easier to find and fill. The blending is the critical step. A hard line between the lid color and the crease color is a beginner's mark. She is not a beginner. She blends with a clean brush, a few light circular strokes where the two shades meet, until the transition is smooth and gradual, and the eye looks as though the color simply deepens naturally as it moves inward. This takes less than a minute when you have done it enough times that the muscle memory is fully formed. The brow bone highlight is applied last in this step. A soft ivory or pale champagne, pressed against the arch of the brow with a fingertip and blended upward, catching the light in a way that lifts the whole eye area. It is a small detail and an effective one, and she never skips it. When the eyeshadow is complete, the face has depth it did not have 3 minutes ago. The eyes have weight and definition. They draw attention. They communicate something about the level of effort that was made before this person walked into the room. And in the 1980s, that communication matters. The blush of the 1980s does not sit softly on the apple of the cheek the way modern tutorials insist it should. It runs in a clean diagonal line from the cheekbone upward toward the temple. Sometimes so vivid, it looks as though it was drawn there with a marker. She loads the brush from a round compact, taps it twice, and sweeps it on with a confidence that comes from 10 years of doing exactly this. The compact is one of the longest-lived items on the vanity. A good pressed blush lasts for months, the dome of color slowly hollowing at the center where the brush always lands first, leaving a slight ridge at the outer edge. She rotates the brush in small circles to pick up an even coat of powder, then taps the handle against the side of the compact to knock the excess off. Too much blush is a real and common error. She has made it before. She does not make it now. The brush itself matters. A blush brush in the 1980s is a full, rounded dome of soft bristles on a long handle, the kind designed to carry powder and deposit it with enough diffusion that a single stroke covers the intended area without landing in one dense patch. She found her brush at a department store cosmetics counter years ago, paid slightly more than she normally would for a brush, and has never regretted it. A good brush is not a luxury. It is a tool. And the right tool makes a noticeable difference in the finished result. The application begins at the temple, where the brush lands first and the color is most concentrated, then sweeps downward and inward along the cheekbone in a single fluid motion. She does not go below the cheek hollow. She does not go past the outer corner of the eye. These are the boundaries, understood intuitively after years of practice, and staying within them is what keeps the blush looking intentional rather than accidental. The color is usually something in the coral or peach family, or a deep rose that reads as warm in daylight and slightly dramatic under artificial light. Cool pinks exist in the Decades palette as well, worn more often by women with cooler skin tones. But the warm family dominates the vanity tables of this particular era. The blush has to work with the lipstick, which means the two shades are chosen together, considered as a unit, the warmth of the cheek and the warmth of the mouth calibrated, to read as a coordinated whole. After the main application, she picks up a wider, softer brush, a powder brush, and sweeps it lightly across the entire face. This step blends the edges of the blush into the surrounding foundation, softening the stripes slightly, connecting the color to the rest of the face, rather than letting it sit on top of it. The result is a cheek that has been shaped and defined without looking like a project. She holds the compact mirror at arm's length and tilts her face left and right, checking the symmetry. The two sides should be equal, which they almost are, and occasionally are not. And when they are not, she picks up the brush again and makes a correction. Symmetry is not vanity. It is the standard, the minimum acceptable result of a step she has done enough times to do in her sleep. The blush is what gives the finished face its warmth. Without it, the foundation and powder leave the skin looking slightly flat and pale, the eyeshadow hovering above a surface that does not quite match its energy. The blush is what makes the whole face cohere, pulling the elements together into something that reads as alive and present. She knows this. She has known it for years. She taps the compact closed and sets it back in its place. Every woman has a brand. Not just a preferred mascara, but a specific tube she returns to again and again. One that lives in the second drawer propped upright in a ceramic cup on the vanity. In the 1980s, mascara is a serious business. The goal is volume and length, dramatically applied, often in more than 3 coats, with a small comb pulled through the lashes between each pass to keep the clumps apart. The tube is opened with a slight twist, and the wand comes out loaded with product. The smell of fresh mascara is a very particular smell. Slightly plastic, slightly medicinal, always the same regardless of brand. One of those scents so specific to a decade and a ritual that it bypasses memory and lands directly somewhere more instinctive. She wipes the excess off on the rim of the tube, a practiced gesture done without looking, and leans toward the mirror. The first coat goes on from root to tip in a slow zigzag motion, the wand moving from side to side as it travels up the lash to coat each hair individually rather than just painting the surface of the lash line. This is the technique she read about in a magazine and has used since. The zigzag that catches the lashes from every angle in a single stroke. She does the upper lashes first, all the way across. Then the lower lashes with the wand held vertically, touching each small lash with the tip of the bristles. She waits. Not long. 30 seconds, maybe a minute, while she does something else, recaps her lipstick, or adjusts the blush with a clean brush. The waiting is important because mascara applied over wet mascara is the path to clumping, and clumping is the enemy of the look she is building. The pause is discipline. She has learned through experience that the pause is worth it. The second coat goes on the same way. Slightly more product now that the first coat has given the lashes more surface to grip. The lashes are longer with the second coat, more separated. They have begun to assert themselves as a feature rather than a border. She checks in the mirror and decides whether a third coat is warranted. For every day, sometimes 2 is enough. For an event, 3 is standard. For a Saturday night, the number is however many it takes to get the result she wants. The lash comb comes out between coats or after the final coat, a small metal-toothed tool on a short handle that she runs through the lashes from base to tip to separate any hairs that have stuck together. The comb leaves the lashes defined and individual, each one coated and visible, fanning outward from the eye in a dark, full fringe. This is the mascara look of the 1980s, dense and dramatic and worn without apology. She does not use an eyelash curler before the mascara because the combination of curling and multiple coats, in her experience, leads to lashes that are slightly too curved at the tip, giving them an artificial upward flip that she finds excessive. Other women curl first, some curl after, some curl both times. The debate has gone unresolved for decades and will continue to go unresolved. The tube goes back in the cup, wand first, lid tightened. She will use this same tube for the next 2 or 3 months, adding a drop of saline solution when the formula begins to dry out. coaxing the last usable weeks from the product before it goes stiff enough to require replacement. Wasting mascara before its time is something she does not do. The product is reliable, the routine is daily, and both are treated with the same practical respect. She does not leave the house without it. This is not a personal preference. This is a rule, absorbed somewhere between adolescence and adulthood, so deeply ingrained that the act of putting on lipstick is less a choice than a completion. The lipstick of the 1980s comes in corals and wines and mauves that have no equivalent today, and a woman who knows her shade can find it in her purse by touch alone. The tube is uncapped with a practiced twist, the base rotated until the flat-topped bullet of color rises into view. She holds it at the particular angle her hand settled into years ago, slightly tilted, the bottom of the tube resting against her palm. The mouth is relaxed, slightly open, the upper lip drawn down taut so the surface is smooth and the line can be placed accurately. She starts at the bow, the small double peak at the center of the upper lip, and moves outward toward each corner in 2 strokes. Liner comes first for some women, a separate pencil that defines the outer edge of the lips before the color goes on, keeping the lipstick from feathering into the small lines around the mouth that appear after a certain age and that foundation alone cannot always prevent. She uses a liner in a shade slightly deeper than her lipstick, drawing the line with the same steady hand she uses for the eyebrow pencil, filling in the natural shape of her lips or extending it very slightly at the corners. The line is then blended inward slightly with her fingertip before the lipstick goes on top. The color she reaches for most often is a warm mauve, the kind of shade that was everywhere in the mid-decade, deep enough to read on the face, but not so dark that it requires a completely different approach to the rest of the makeup. She has tried other shades. A coral she wore for 2 summers in the early part of the decade. A deeper burgundy she keeps for winter and for evenings. A nude that she bought because the magazine said it was elegant and that she has worn perhaps twice because it makes her feel, as she once put it to her sister, like she forgot her lipstick. She presses her lips together after the first application, the top against the bottom in a light even pressure that distributes the color evenly across both, then opens and checks the result in the mirror. If the color needs building, she goes back for a second pass. If the edges need cleanup, she uses a cotton swab or the corner of a tissue. When it is right, she blots, a single layer of tissue pressed against the lips, held for a moment, absorbing the excess product and leaving behind the pigment, which will now last longer than an unblotted lip. The purse lipstick is a separate matter from the vanity lipstick. She keeps a tube in her handbag at all times, not necessarily the same shade as what she is wearing, but close enough that a midday touch-up will not be jarring. The handbag lipstick is chosen for portability and reliability, a formula that is not too creamy, not too dry, not so expensive that losing the bag would be a catastrophe. It lives in the inside zipper pocket, next to the compact, next to the small mirror she uses for touch-ups in the car. The lipstick is the last step before she is done. She stands back from the vanity mirror, the full half-step back that gives her a complete view of the face assembled over the last 30 minutes, and she looks at the whole thing at once, the eyeshadow and the blush and the mascara and the liner and the foundation, and at the center of all of it, the lipstick, the finishing note that makes the whole composition land. She caps the tube, drops it in the tray, and the face is finished. The day can begin. The bottle is on the vanity's right side, always. It might be Opium or White Shoulders or Charlie or Chanel No. 5 in its thick glass bottle with the rectangular stopper. She does not spritz lightly. She applies with intention, 2 pumps to the wrists, 1 behind each ear, and sometimes a touch to the hair, because she learned somewhere that the warmth carries the scent longer. Perfume in the 1980s is not a whisper. The decade's most iconic fragrances are dense, opulent, constructed from deep bass notes of wood and musk and amber that settle into fabric and skin and linger for hours after the wearer has left the room. You could walk into a church pew on a Sunday morning and know from the warm air above the seat that someone who wore Giorgio Beverly Hills had been sitting there recently. The scent stayed. That was considered its greatest virtue. She has had her signature scent for years. Not since she was a teenager, when she moved through phases the way teenagers move through everything, but since her mid-20s when she found the one that felt like hers and stopped looking. The signature scent is not something she chooses deliberately so much as something that chooses her. The fragrance that smells on her skin differently than it smells in the bottle or on anyone else. The chemistry of the two things combining into something that becomes, over years, simply the way she smells. Her husband knows the scent without thinking about it. Her children know it as the smell of her leaving for work in the morning or the smell of her dressed for an evening out. The particular excitement and formality of the fragrance cue tied in their memory to the image of her in a good dress at the front door. Decades from now, an adult child will walk through a department store and the fragrance counter will stop them cold in an aisle because a spritz card carries the scent. And for a full moment, the years will collapse, and they will be 8 years old again, watching her apply it in the mirror. She applies to the pulse points because the pulse points generate heat, and heat lifts fragrance, and she knows this the way she knows, to blend the blush and wait between coats of mascara. Knowledge absorbed through repetition and observation over a lifetime of mornings. The wrists behind the ears, the inner elbows on special occasions, the décolletage in the evening, a single light press of the wrist against the chest just below the collarbone. She does not spray into the air and walk through the cloud because she read somewhere that this wastes more fragrance than it applies. Direct application, deliberate placement. The bottle is kept away from direct sunlight, which degrades the fragrance over time. This is something she knows from having ruined a bottle of something expensive by leaving it on a windowsill one summer. Coming back to find the scent had shifted into something slightly sour. The delicate top notes burned off by the light and heat. The vanity is away from the window. The bottle goes back in its exact spot after every use. There is a secondary perfume, lighter, kept in the bathroom drawer, used on ordinary mornings when the signature scent feels like more than the day calls for. A floral, something simple, an anise, or something similar. The kind of fragrance that is pleasant without being a statement. She wears this on Tuesday mornings when she is only going to the grocery store and the dry cleaner and does not need to arrive anywhere with the full weight of her signature behind her. Perfume is the one step in the routine that does not show. You cannot see it in the mirror. You cannot check it for symmetry or coverage or correct placement. You simply apply it and trust it, and then you walk into the world trailing something invisible and entirely your own. What you see on a woman's head in the morning often tells you what her evening looked like. In 1982, she may have sat at the kitchen table, watching television with pink foam rollers wound tight all the way around her head, secured with plastic picks that made sleep impossible. This is not vanity without purpose. The rollers are infrastructure. The curl they produce will hold until Thursday, if she is careful. The roller ritual begins in the early evening, after the dishes and before bed, or sometimes during the 9 o'clock news when there's nothing else pressing and her hands are free and the hair is almost dry from the shower. She sections the hair with a wide-tooth comb, working from the nape of the neck upward, taking each section around a roller and winding it firmly from the tip to the root, then securing the roller with the plastic pick that clicks into place with a satisfying snap. The foam rollers are the most common, soft cylinders in various diameters. the smaller ones producing tighter curls and the larger ones producing the kind of full, soft wave that is the desired result for most women of this era. She has sets of both and uses them in combination. Smaller at the crown for volume and lift, larger at the sides and the ends for the curl that will frame the face. The arrangement is not arbitrary. It has been refined over many evenings into the precise configuration that produces, reliably, the style she is building toward. Hot rollers exist by this decade, and many women use them in the morning for a faster set. The velvet-covered rollers heated in a small plastic case on the bathroom counter and applied to dry hair for a 10-minute set that produces a looser, more temporary wave. Hot rollers are for when time is short or when a quick refresh is needed midweek. Cold rollers set overnight are for when the result needs to last, when Thursday is coming and the style should still hold, when the weekend has something on the calendar that requires the hair to look its best from Saturday morning through Saturday night. Sleeping in rollers is one of the small discomforts of the era that is simply accepted as the cost of the result. She arranges a pillow in a specific way, slightly flattened at the center so her head can rest without pressing the rollers at the wrong angles. She has learned which positions are tolerable and which wake her at 2 a.m. with a plastic pick digging into the back of her skull. The learning curve was steep and real, and she worked through it years ago. In the morning, the picks come out one by one and dropped into the roller case, and the rollers are unwound carefully from the tip down, the curl released intact if everything went correctly. She does not brush the curl out immediately. She separates it with her fingers first, gently, working through the sections to loosen them into waves rather than tight spirals, letting the curl relax slightly before the brush and the hairspray do their final work. The result of a good roller set is a fullness and movement that no other method quite replicates. The hair has body at the root because the rollers lifted it away from the scalp during the setting process. The ends have curve and direction. The whole shape has an intentionality to it that is visible from across the room. The hair not merely grown and washed, but actually built into something with a beginning and an end. Her neighbor does the same thing every Wednesday night, so her hair is done for Thursday. They have never discussed this directly, but they both know it, the way neighbors know the rhythms of the houses beside them without having to be told. The light in the kitchen, on at 9. The television sound faint through the wall. The woman at the table with rollers in her hair and a cup of tea cooling beside her, doing the work of tomorrow in the quiet of tonight. There is a sound that belongs to this era the way the coffee percolator belongs to the 1950s. The hairdryer of the 1980s is loud. It is the sustained roar of hot-moving air filling the bathroom, drowning out the radio, sometimes drowning out a whole conversation. She holds it 6 inches from the brush, lifting the root, rotating the barrel under, building something that will not move until she decides to let it. The dryer itself is a hard plastic shell in cream or white, or occasionally a dusty rose, with a pistol grip handle and a dial on the side that moves between low, medium, and high heat, and a separate switch for the fan speed. The cord is long enough to reach the vanity from the outlet near the sink without pulling taut, though it sometimes catches on the edge of the counter, and she has learned to loop it a certain way to keep it clear of her elbow while she works. The dryer lives on a hook on the back of the bathroom door or coiled in the cabinet beneath the sink, and it comes out every single morning without exception. She starts on high heat at the roots, bending forward from the waist so her hair falls away from her head and the heat can reach the scalp, which is where the volume lives. Volume in the 1980s begins at the root. A flat root means a flat style, and a flat style means the morning has not been finished properly. She lifts each section with a round brush, the barrel pulling the hair away from the scalp as the heat follows, and she rotates the brush slowly inward or outward depending on which direction that section of hair is meant to move. The round brush is the essential partner of the hairdryer. the instrument that translates heat into shape. Her round brush has a metal barrel that conducts heat, bristles that grip the hair firmly enough to control it without tearing it, and a handle worn slightly smooth where her palm always rests. A good round brush is not replaced casually. It is replaced reluctantly when the bristles finally give out, or the barrel develops a rough spot, and the new one takes a week or two of mornings before it feels right in the hand. She works in sections, clipping the upper layers out of the way with a duckbill clip while she finishes the underneath, then releasing each layer in order, working from the nape upward. This is the method that produces even drying and consistent volume throughout the entire head, rather than a style that is perfectly done at the top and slightly damp and flat underneath. She learned the sectioning method from a stylist who demonstrated it at the salon chair, and she brought it home and practiced it on her own bathroom in the weeks following until the sequence was automatic. The heat is something she has simply made her peace with. The bathroom gets warm. The back of her neck gets warm. Her wrist aches slightly after a full blow-dry session because of the angle the brush requires, and she switches hands occasionally to give each arm a rest. These are the minor inconveniences of a process that is simply part of the morning, no more remarkable than the time it takes to make breakfast or pack a lunch. When the hair is dry, she drops the heat and uses the Cool Shot button, a function that sets the style by closing the cuticle of the hair with a blast of cool air, locking the shape that the heat built. The Cool Shot is not optional. It is what separates a style that holds all day from one that begins to droop by noon. She presses the button and works the cool air through the finished sections in long strokes, and she can feel the hair change beneath the brush, settling into its final form. The dryer clicks off, and the bathroom is suddenly quiet. The silence after the dryer is its own particular feeling, the world slightly muffled for a few seconds as the ears readjust. The mirror is fogged at the edges. Her hair is shaped and full and warm to the touch. The sound of every morning is over, and everything that follows will be quieter. The can is on the counter, or sitting on the edge of the tub, or balanced on the toilet tank. It is always nearby, because the last step is the most important one. Aqua Net in the 1980s is not a finishing spray. It is a structural product. She holds the can at arm's length, closes her eyes, and envelops herself in a fine mist that smells sharp and chemical and familiar. And she knows without looking that nothing on her head will shift until she chooses. The can is recognizable from across any drugstore aisle. The pink label with the blue lettering, the cap that clicks back on with a satisfying firmness. Aqua Net comes in several hold levels, from regular to super to extra super hold, and the women of this decade are not reaching for the regular. They are reaching for the one with the most words on it, the one that promises the most resistance to humidity, wind, the passage of time, and the general entropy that begins working against a hairstyle the moment it is finished. She shakes the can twice before spraying. This is habit, passed down or picked up somewhere along the way, and whether or not it makes a technical difference, she does it every time. She tips her head slightly and sprays in a sweeping arc from one side to the other, keeping the can moving so the product does not land in one concentrated spot and go stiff and white against the hair. The technique is a gentle arc, a pass, a light and even coat that the hair absorbs before the next pass follows. The smell of Aqua Net is one of the most instantly recognizable scents of the decade. It is not pleasant in the way that perfume is pleasant. It is not meant to be. It smells like the business end of beauty, sharp and aerosol and slightly sweet. The smell of a product that knows exactly what it is and makes no apologies for it. Decades later, a woman who grew up in this era will walk through the hairspray aisle of a drugstore and stop without knowing why, the memory of the smell arriving before the reason does. The volume at the crown is where the spray is most concentrated. She cups her free hand over her eyes as a shield and directs the nozzle toward the roots. A quick, targeted burst that stiffens the lifted hair at the root and keeps it there. The bangs get special attention if she wears them. Bangs in the 1980s are their own architecture, swept to one side or lifted at the root into a wave or curled under at the ends. And every configuration requires that the spray be applied at the exact right moment in the exact right direction to preserve the shape. She has used other brands. She has tried them the way you try a new route to a familiar place, with mild curiosity and a quiet expectation of returning to the original. Other brands work. Some work quite well. But Aquanet is the one that has been on her counter for years, the one whose behavior she knows completely, the one whose particular combination of hold and dry time and finish she has calibrated her entire morning routine around. Switching brands would mean recalibrating everything. She has no interest in that. The finished hair does not crunch under the fingertips when done correctly. This is the mark of a proper application. Enough product to hold the style, but not so much that the hair feels coated. She touches the crown lightly, checking, and when it is right, she sets the can back in its place and steps back from the mirror. The hair's done. The face is done. She is assembled. The can of Aquanet stands on the counter like a small pink monument to the effort it took to get here, and the morning is complete. She does not wash her hair every day. This is worth understanding clearly, not as a criticism, but as a window into a different relationship with time and effort. In the 1980s, washing the hair is an event, a production that requires planning, drying time, and styling time, and most women build their week around it. The wash happens 2 or 3 times a week for most women of this era. Sometimes less for women with very thick or coarse hair that takes longer to dry and style. Sometimes more for women with fine hair that oils quickly at the roots. The schedule is personal and consistent, a rhythm built around the week's social and professional demands, timed so that wash day produces fresh hair for the events that most require it. A Tuesday wash might be timed for Wednesday's important meeting. A Saturday wash is timed for Saturday night. The shampoo of the 1980s is not the silicone-laden, sulfate-stripped, pH-balanced formula of later decades. It is a straightforward cleansing product, sometimes 2-in-1 with conditioner included, sometimes separate, usually in a tall bottle with a flip cap that lives on the edge of the tub or in a wire caddy hanging from the shower head. She uses a generous amount, works it into a full lather from roots to ends, and rinses thoroughly. The lather is part of the pleasure. A shampoo that does not lather properly is a shampoo she does not trust. Conditioner is applied to the ends only because she was told that putting conditioner at the roots weights the hair down and reduces the volume she spends the rest of the morning trying to build. This information has been with her so long she could not tell you where it came from. She holds the ends of her hair in one hand and works the conditioner through with the other, leaves it for the count of 30 or 60, while she finishes the rest of the shower, then rinses. The ends are smooth after, easy to comb through without tearing, and this smoothness is preserved through the drying process if she is careful. The towel dry is another skill. She does not rub vigorously. Her rubbing causes frizz, tangles the hair into a rough texture that is difficult to style, and breaks the fragile hair when it is at its most vulnerable, which is when it is wet. She wraps the towel around the hair and presses, absorbs the excess water by pressing and releasing rather than rubbing, then wraps the towel into a turban on top of her head and goes about whatever needs doing while the towel does its work. She does not wash her hair at night if she can avoid it, because washing at night means sleeping on wet or damp hair and waking to a shape that no roller set can entirely correct. Morning washes are preferred, on a day when there is enough time to dry and style before the first obligation of the day. This is why wash days are planned in advance, penciled into the week's schedule the way an appointment is penciled in, because they require a particular kind of unhurried morning. Between washes, she manages the roots with powder if they oil early, or with careful styling that directs the lifted sections to cover the areas that have lost their freshness. This is a skill developed over years of watching the hair cycle through its weekly states and learning how to work with each state rather than against it. Day 1 hair is full and fresh and requires the least effort. Day 3 hair requires the most artistry. Day 4 hair, when it comes to that, is what hats were invented for, and she knows exactly which hat goes with which coat. There is a box on the bathroom counter that has been there since Saturday morning. It is a home perm kit with a photograph of a smiling woman on the front and a smell inside that will linger in the house until at least Tuesday. The home perm is one of the most ambitious beauty rituals of the 1980s, attempted by women who have done it a dozen times before, and by women trying it for the very first time on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The box contains a bottle of waving lotion, a bottle of neutralizer, a packet of end papers, a bag of small plastic rods in various sizes, and a set of instructions printed in a font small enough that she holds the paper at arm's length the first time she reads it and slightly closer every time after. The instructions are followed with the approximate precision of someone baking from a recipe for the 10th time, meaning the general sequence is respected, but the exact timing is adjusted based on personal experience. The process begins with freshly washed hair, damp but not dripping. She sections the hair and begins rolling, taking small subsections and wrapping each one around a rod from the ends inward, securing each rod with the rubber band that comes with it, working from the nape of the neck upward in neat rows. The end papers are critical. They wrap around the very tips of each section before the rod is applied, protecting the ends from breaking and ensuring the curl forms evenly rather than bending at a sharp angle where the paper stops and the rod begins. The waving lotion goes on after all the rods are in, applied with a small applicator bottle, saturating each rod thoroughly from all sides. The smell arrives with the lotion. It is the smell of the home perm, unmistakable and total. A sharp chemical scent that is somewhere between ammonia and something older and more organic. Not unpleasant exactly, but insistent, filling the bathroom and drifting through the house, in a way that makes the dog leave the room and makes her husband ask from the hallway whether she needs him to open a window. She sets the kitchen timer and waits. The timing on a home perm is the most consequential variable in the process. Underdeveloped, and the wave is loose and drops out within 2 weeks. Overdeveloped, and the hair comes out frizzy and dry, the curl too tight, the texture damaged in a way that takes months of careful management to grow out. The box says 15 to 20 minutes. She knows from experience that her hair processes in 17, and she pulls the timer forward to 17 without deliberating. The neutralizer goes on after the rinse while the rods are still in, applied the same way as the waving lotion, and it works to stop the chemical process and lock the curl into its new shape. She leaves this on for 5 minutes exactly. Then the rods come out one by one, dropped into the sink, and the hair falls in tight, damp spirals that are dramatically different from what she started with and will relax over the next 48 hours into the soft wave she is actually aiming for. The style is not finished for 2 days. She is told not to wash the hair for 48 hours after a perm, not to brush it aggressively, not to use heat on it until it has had time to settle. She uses this period to let the curl find its final form, scrunching it gently with a diffuser attachment on the hairdryer, coaxing it toward the shape she envisioned when she stood in the drugstore aisle and put the box in her cart. By Monday morning, the wave is soft and full and exactly what she wanted, and the smell is mostly faded, and the bathroom counter is cleaned and cleared, the rods rinsed and dried, and returned to the box for next time. She does her nails on Sunday evening, not because Sunday is special, but because Sunday gives the Polish enough time to fully cure before the work week demands anything of her hands. The bottles are in a small basket or a drawer, and she has 3 or 4 colors she cycles between. In the 1980s, nails are long if possible, rounded or squared at the tip, and the polish is applied in careful strokes that take longer than they look. The preparation begins with the removal of whatever is already on the nails. The cotton ball is saturated with acetone remover, the kind that smells aggressively chemical and takes everything off in 1 or 2 firm passes. And she works from the base of each nail to the tip, taking the old color off completely before the new goes on. She checks each nail under the lamp for any remaining color at the edges and at the cuticle, where the old polish tends to cling longest, and she is thorough because any residue will show through the new coat. The cuticles are pushed back with a small wooden stick, softened slightly by the remover and by the warm water of the evening's dishes. And she works gently, not cutting unless there is a hangnail that will not lay flat otherwise. The nails are filed with a small emery board, working in one direction only from the outer edge toward the center, because she has been told since her teenage years that sawing back and forth splits the nail layers, and she has never done it. The shape she files toward is her personal standard. Slightly oval at the sides, flat across the tip, a shape she can reproduce from memory with her eyes half closed. The base coat goes on first. It is clear or slightly milky, and it serves 2 purposes. It protects the nail from staining, which certain deep colors will cause without it, and it gives the color coat something to adhere to, so the finished manicure lasts longer. She applies it in 3 strokes per nail, 1 down the center and 1 down each side, a technique she uses for every coat, and she does all 10 nails before going back to the first to add color, giving the base coat a few minutes to tack up. The color goes on in the same 3-stroke pattern. She holds the brush so the bristles fan out slightly under the pressure of the first stroke, depositing an even coat without pressing so hard that the brush drags or leaves ridges. The first coat is thin. It will look streaky and uneven, and she knows this and applies it anyway, because a thin first coat dries faster and gives the second coat a surface to bond with. The second coat is where the color arrives fully, opaque and smooth, the shade she chose from the basket becoming real on her hand. The color this particular Sunday evening is something in the brick red family, a warm, deep tone that reads as professional during the week and festive on the weekend, a shade versatile enough to justify its place in the rotation. She chose it at the drugstore 2 weeks ago, drawn by the color in the bottle, confirmed by testing a stroke of it on her thumbnail in the aisle. She bought it without deliberating further. The top coat seals everything, adding shine and hardness, a clear final layer that she applies in the same 3 strokes, slightly thicker than the base coat, and she wraps the tip of each nail with the brush to seal the edge where chips always start. She sets the timer for 10 minutes and does not touch anything. She sits with her hands slightly apart, palms down, fingers relaxed, and waits. The television is on in the other room. The house is quiet. For 10 minutes on a Sunday evening, her only obligation is to be still and let something set properly. There are worse ways to end a week. The pink jar of Pond's cold cream or oil of Olay sits on the right side of the sink, and it is used with the same reliability that a woman brushes her teeth. Moisturizer in the 1980s is understood as prevention and maintenance, something her mother told her to start early and never stop, and she took that advice. The jar is opened every morning after the cleanse and every evening before bed. Morning and evening, without exception. The way certain things in a well-run life simply happen on schedule without requiring a decision each time. The morning moisturizer is lighter, absorbed quickly, a base that the foundation can sit on without sliding. The evening moisturizer is richer, thicker, something with a heavier feel that she applies more generously and that stays on the skin through the night while she sleeps, and the skin does whatever it does in the dark that the beauty counter promised her it was doing. She uses her fingertips, 3 on each hand, pressing small dots of product across the forehead, both cheeks, the nose, and the chin, then smoothing outward from the center of the face. In the upward strokes her mother demonstrated on her own face when she was still a girl watching from the bathroom doorway. The upward motion is non-negotiable, always upward, never dragging the skin downward against gravity, which is already doing enough of that on its own without any help from a moisturizer application. The neck is included every time. The neck is where age appears earliest, and most honestly, her mother told her, and the neck is often neglected because it is below the chin line and slightly out of the immediate field of the mirror. She tilts her chin up and applies down the throat and across the collarbone, the same upward strokes carried downward from the jaw, and the neck is considered as much a part of the face's maintenance as the forehead. The under-eye area gets a separate product on some mornings, a small tube of something lighter and more specific, an eye cream she found at the department store counter on a Saturday when she had time to stop and talk to the woman in the white coat. The eye cream is applied with the ring finger of each hand, the gentlest finger, tapped rather than rubbed along the orbital bone below the eye, where the skin is thin enough to see the blue of the vein beneath it. Tapping does not pull. Tapping does not stretch. Tapping is what the woman in the white coat told her, and she has tapped every morning since. Oil of Olay in particular carries a particular cultural weight in this decade. The pink fluid in its distinctive bottle, the television commercial showing a woman of uncertain middle age, with skin that the narrator credited entirely to the product, had entered the decade's beauty consciousness as the reasonable, accessible answer to the question of aging. It was not cheap for a drugstore product. It was not expensive enough to feel out of reach. It occupied a practical middle ground that made it the bathroom sink companion of millions of women across the country, used every morning in millions of bathrooms that all smelled faintly of the same pale pink lotion. The whole process takes less than 2 minutes, but 2 minutes performed twice daily, every day, for decades, adds up to something. She does not think of it in those terms. She thinks of it the way she thinks of all the maintenance routines of a careful life, as simply what you do, the thing you were taught, the habit so thoroughly embedded that skipping it feels less like a choice and more like forgetting something important. The jar goes back to its place. The towel goes back on its hook. And the face, clean and moisturized and ready for whatever comes next, turns away from the mirror. Before the dress, before the blouse, before anything else is chosen from the closet, there is a decision made in the underwear drawer. The 1980s woman may not wear a girdle the way her mother wore one in the 1950s, but shapewear is alive and present and quietly influential, a layer between skin and clothing that most women in this decade consider as routine as pantyhose. The garment has changed its name by now. It is not always called a girdle, a word that belongs to her mother's generation and carries the faint weight of that era's more rigid standards. In the 1980s, it is a body briefer or a control brief or a shaping slip, but what it does is essentially the same as what the girdle always did, which is to smooth and compress and redirect, creating under the clothing a silhouette that the body on its own might not provide. She steps into it in the bathroom, the elastic waistband rolled down to make entry easier, then unrolled back up once it is on. settling the garment into place with a series of practiced adjustments. The fit should be firm, but not punishing. Too loose, and it serves no purpose. Too tight, and it creates visible lines under the clothing and makes sitting at a desk for 8 hours a physical negotiation. She has owned enough of them to know the difference immediately in the first 30 seconds of wearing it, whether a new one fits correctly or whether she will need to return it. The materials are nylon and spandex, warm against the skin, smooth enough that clothing slides over the surface without bunching or riding up. This smoothness is part of the product's practical value. A dress worn over shapewear hangs differently than a dress worn without it, the fabric falling in a clean, uninterrupted line from shoulder to hem rather than gathering at the hip or waist in the small pulls and puckers that skin and underwear create. The clothing behaves better. This is noticed. This is the point. The culture of this decade has very specific ideas about the female silhouette in professional clothing and power dressing, the blazers and the pencil skirts, and the structured dresses that define the decade's working woman, requires a clean foundation. The clothing is structured. The foundation beneath it is structured. Everything from the hairspray to the control brief is working toward the same end, which is a presentation that reads as deliberate and composed, a body that appears to be fully managed. She does not discuss this garment outside the house. It is not a secret exactly, but it is private, belonging to the category of things women of this era maintain without advertising, the significant invisible effort that the finished public presentation rests on. Other women know. It is understood between them the way many things are understood between women of this generation, without needing to be named. There is a generation coming that will reclaim comfort in a different way, that will eventually make shapewear optional and make the decision not to wear it equally acceptable in professional settings. But in 1982, standing in the bathroom pulling the elastic waistband into place, that generation has not arrived yet. She finishes the adjustment, checks the lines in the full-length mirror on the back of the bedroom door, and moves to the closet. The invisible architecture is in place. The rest can go on top. They are in the second drawer from the top, folded in their flat cardboard rectangles, or bundled in small balls by color. Beige, suntan, off-black, taupe. She knows which shade goes with which outfit without having to think about it. Pantyhose in the 1980s are not optional for most women in professional or social settings. They are expected the way a pressed shirt is expected, the way punctuality is expected. The putting on of pantyhose is a physical skill with a specific sequence that every woman who wears them has developed and refined until it is entirely automatic. She sits on the edge of the bed. She gathers the leg of the hose down to the toe, bunching the fabric between her fingers so that the entire leg is collapsed into a small ring of material. She points her foot, slides it into the gathered toe, and works the fabric up to the knee before switching to the other leg, doing the same. Then standing and pulling both legs upward in alternating small lifts until the waistband sits correctly at the waist. The sequence is practiced and efficient and bears no resemblance to the frantic pulling and hopping that happens when she is running late and skips the gathering step. She has run late. She has skipped the gathering step. She has stood on one foot pulling at a resistant waistband while the other foot pushed against the floor, and the nylon made a sound that meant a run was forming somewhere in the leg, and she has had to start over with a new pair. She does not skip the gathering step. Runs are the constant threat. Pantyhose in the 1980s run at the suggestion of a fingernail, at the slight snag of a rough patch of skin, at the edge of a desk chair or the corner of a drawer, or a nothing so invisible she never finds what caused it. She keeps a backup pair at the office, folded in the bottom drawer of her desk, for the run that announces itself in the elevator on the way to a morning meeting. Clear nail polish applied to the end of a small run will sometimes stop its progress. buying another few hours. This trick is known to every woman who wears pantyhose and deployed with the practiced calm of someone who has managed small crises many times before. The control top pantyhose is the pantyhose with ambitions, a slightly denser panel of material at the waist and hip that serves some of the same purpose as shapewear, smoothing the midsection under a skirt or dress. Many women wear control top as their standard, not specifically for the shaping effect, but because they find the denser panel more comfortable and more secure at the waist, less likely to roll down slightly over the course of a long day. The control top stays put. This is its greatest virtue. She stores them carefully, not tossed into the drawer but folded or rolled to preserve the fabric, the toes tucked in so they do not catch on anything when she is looking for a specific shade in the morning and does not want to damage what she is not using. A woman who has managed her pantyhose drawer properly can find the right shade in approximately 10 seconds without turning on the overhead light. This is a small but genuine organizational skill. By the time the decade is over, the standards around pantyhose will have begun to soften slightly. Younger women will begin wearing bare legs in settings where hosiery was previously mandatory, and the cultural expectation will start a long, slow shift. But in 1982, the drawer is full, and the sequence is automatic, and bare legs in a professional setting is not yet a conversation anyone in her office is having. She finishes pulling the waistband into place, smooths the fabric over both thighs with a flat palm, and stands up. The pantyhose are on. The day can begin. Let's talk about what she puts on when she is dressing for something serious. The blazer is hanging on the back of the closet door, shoulders built out an inch on each side, lapels wide, fabric a shade of burgundy or steel gray that means business. Power dressing in the 1980s is not accidental. It is intentional, studied, and tied to a very specific cultural moment when women were entering corporate spaces in larger numbers than ever before. The shoulder pad is the defining structural element of the decade's professional clothing, and understanding what it meant requires understanding what preceded it. The women entering management and executive roles in the early 1980s were doing so in workplaces designed by and largely for men, with dress codes and professional norms built around the male suit. The answer that fashion offered was a female garment that borrowed the architecture of the male suit at its most authoritative point, the shoulder, and made it the center of the female professional silhouette. She bought the blazer at a department store, tried it on in the fitting room under the unforgiving fluorescent light that department stores use, assessed the shoulder line in the three-way mirror, and said yes, because the shoulder line was right. The rest of the blazer could be adjusted. The shoulder line either works or it does not. On this blazer, it works. The pad filling the jacket to a squared, clean line that reads as structured and capable from the moment she walks into a room. The blazer goes over a silk blouse, or a blouse in a blouse-like fabric, something with a collar or a bow at the throat. The bow being one of the decade's most recognizable details, a large floppy bow that softened the severity of the structured jacket above it, and that exists at the intersection of femininity and authority in a way that the 1980s spent considerable cultural energy negotiating. She has 3 of these blouses. She rotates them with the blazer throughout the week. The skirt is pencil cut, hitting at the knee, or just below, in a fabric that matches or coordinates with the blazer. The matching suit is the most authoritative option, a single solid statement of professionalism that requires no further coordination decisions in the morning. The coordinating skirt requires slightly more thought, but offers slightly more flexibility across the week. She has both and deploys them according to the day's demands. The shoes are heels, low to mid-height, in a neutral leather that works with the skirt and the pantyhose, not high enough to impede movement through a full day of meetings and hallways, high enough to meet the expectation that professional women's footwear involves a heel. The shoes are polished. This is not a detail she overlooks. Unpolished shoes on an otherwise assembled woman are a visible inconsistency, the kind of thing that is noticed without being named, and she has spent too much time on everything above the ankles to lose points below them. The completed outfit, hanging on the door or laid across the bed the night before, if she is organized, which she often is, represents something larger than itself. It is the visual language of a woman who belongs in rooms where decisions are made, assembled deliberately in a decade when that belonging was still being argued about in certain offices and proved daily through 100 small acts of competence and presentation. The blazer with the wide shoulders is not a costume. It is a position statement. She puts it on and her posture adjusts slightly, the shoulders back, the spine straight, the whole body understanding that today is a day that requires its best. There is no single document that lists the rules. They were never published in any official way. But they existed, passed down through mothers and aunts and magazine pages and the quiet corrections of a Sunday afternoon. And every woman of this era absorbed them the way you absorb the rules of the road before you ever take a driving test. The rules came in layers. Some were explicit, stated clearly by a mother at a bathroom mirror or a home economics teacher in a classroom that smelled of starch and floor wax. You always wear a bra. You never leave the house in curlers. You do not wear white after Labor Day. You match your shoes to your bag, or if you cannot match them exactly, you choose a neutral for one that allows the other to be the statement. These rules were spoken aloud and repeated and internalized until they no longer required any active thought to follow. Other rules were implicit, conveyed through the slight pause before a comment, the small adjustment of a collar, the look exchanged between two women in a room when a third walked in with something visibly wrong. These were subtler, but equally binding. The rules that govern not just what you wore, but how you wore it, how you carried yourself, how much effort was visible in your appearance, and how much was meant to appear effortless. One of the most consistent rules of the era is the rule of appropriateness, the understanding that every occasion has a corresponding level of dress, and that dressing above or below that level is a social error. Church requires a specific level. A school meeting requires a slightly different level. A backyard barbecue requires something else entirely. Navigating between these levels is a skill so thoroughly practiced by women of this era that they perform it automatically, pulling the right outfit for the occasion the way a musician plays a familiar piece, from memory without consulting the score. The rule of maintenance is perhaps the most pervasive. Nails are kept, hair's done, foundation is worn. These are not optional enhancements for special occasions. They are the baseline, the floor below which a woman does not allow herself to fall in public without specific reason. Illness is a reason. Extraordinary circumstance is a reason. Ordinary Tuesday is not a reason. A woman who appears in public without having attended to these things is making a statement whether she intends to or not, and the statement is not flattering. She absorbed these rules without being given a manual because the manual was the world around her, the women she watched, the magazines she read, the quiet corrections and approvals that shaped her understanding of what done correctly looked like. She is not oppressed by them, not exactly, or at least she does not experience them as oppression in the way that a later generation will describe them. She experiences them as standards, the same way she experiences the standard of a properly set table or a thank you note written within the week. They are the discipline of a life conducted with care. What is harder to see from inside the rules is the weight of them, the accumulation of maintenance and presentation and calibration that adds up over decades of mornings. That weight is real, and it is distributed unevenly, and the generation that follows will begin to say so more directly. But in 1982, standing in front of the full-length mirror doing a final check before leaving the house, What she feels is not weight. What she feels is readiness. The rules have been followed. The face is done. The blazer's on. She is assembled. She opens the door and steps into the morning. There are levels to this. Not every occasion calls for the same face, and a woman in 1982 understands the difference between morning lipstick and evening lipstick, between Sunday makeup and Tuesday makeup, between the face you wear to your sister's wedding and the face you wear to the pediatrician's office. The calibration is constant and largely invisible to anyone who is not doing it. Sunday morning is its own category. Church makeup is not evening makeup, and it is not weekday makeup. It occupies a specific middle register, more considered than the face she wears to the grocery store, but softer than the face she wears to a dinner out. The foundation is applied with the same care as any other day. But the eyeshadow is more neutral, a taupe or a soft brown, rather than the blue she might reach for on a Friday night. The blush is present, but blended further, less stripe and more glow. The lipstick is a coral or a rose, warm and appropriate, the kind of color that reads as cared for without calling attention to itself in a pew. She is dressed and ready 20 minutes before the family needs to leave, which is always, and she uses those 20 minutes to check the children and find her husband's other dress shoe and locate the offering envelope and still appear completely unruffled when the car pulls out of the driveway. The Sunday face is part of the Sunday performance, and the performance is seamless because she has done it every week for years. The grocery store face is a different calculation entirely. She is not going somewhere. She is doing something, and the something involves a cart and a list, and the possibility of running into her neighbor or her child's teacher in the cereal aisle. The grocery store face is therefore not no makeup, but rather the minimum credible makeup, the version that says I have not forgotten myself, even though I am only buying milk and bread. Foundation, yes. A quick pass of blush, not mascara, always. Lipstick or lip gloss because she does not leave the house without something on her mouth. The eyeshadow is optional and usually skipped. The whole process takes 7 minutes and is performed in the bathroom mirror with a speed and efficiency that would impress anyone watching. The neighbor face is the most variable of all because the neighbor interaction is the least predictable. She might be walking to the mailbox or carrying groceries from the car, or standing in the backyard pulling something from the garden, and the neighbor appears over the fence, or from across the driveway with the immediacy of a conversation that did not require scheduling. For these moments she relies on what she calls, without ever using those words, her ambient maintenance level, the baseline state of her appearance on any given day that ensures she is never caught entirely unprepared. The ambient maintenance level means that even on a day she plans to be home all day, she does something. Foundation, or at minimum a tinted moisturizer. A little blush. Lipstick by 10 in the morning, refreshed after lunch. Hair done, not necessarily elaborately, but not in a state she would be embarrassed by at the front door. The ambient level is the floor. Everything above it is calibrated to the occasion. Everything below it does not happen in daylight. This system of calibration is one of the invisible skills of the era, understood by every woman who practices it and largely unnoticed by everyone who benefits from it. The husband who always sees a composed wife, the children who have no memory of their mother looking undone, the neighbor who has known her for 11 years and would struggle to describe her on a bad day because there were no visible bad days, only days that were dressed to different levels of the same consistent standard. The evening face is the full expression of the system. A dinner out, a party, a school event where other adults will be present under good lighting. She sits at the vanity an extra 15 minutes. The eyeshadow is deeper, the liner more defined, the lipstick darker, the perfume applied more generously than on a Tuesday morning. The face she builds for the evening is the same face she builds every morning, but turned up, the volume increased, every element present in its fullest version. She checks the mirror before leaving the house the same way every time. A full look first, the overall impression. Then eyes, lips, the line of the jaw, the hairline. Then a step back for the silhouette. When everything is right, she picks up her bag and walks out, and the evening begins. And nobody in the room will spend a single moment thinking about the 30 years of practiced mornings that produced the woman who just walked in. Open the medicine cabinet above the bathroom sink in 1982 and take stock of what you find. It is a small, hinged world of glass shelves and specific containers, and it tells you more about the decade than almost any other single object in the house. The top shelf belongs to him. Shaving cream in a pressurized can, the kind with the red and white label that has not changed its design in 20 years. A safety razor, or, increasingly by the early 1980s, a twin-blade disposable in an orange and white package. Aftershave in a glass bottle with a flat-sided profile. Old Spice or Brut or English leather. Something with a scent so distinctly male and so distinctly of this era that encountering it decades later stops time completely. A stick of deodorant, a small bottle of aspirin. His side of the cabinet is uncluttered and consistent, changed only when something runs out. The middle and lower shelves belong to her, and they are more populated and more various. The moisturizer decanted into the cabinet from the vanity when the original jar is nearly finished. A bottle of hydrogen peroxide with a brown plastic cap. A tube of Neosporin that has been in the cabinet for 3 years and will remain for 3 more. A thermometer in a plastic case. A small pair of scissors. Calamine lotion for the summers when the children bring poison ivy into the house from the back field. Petroleum jelly in a blue jar with a yellow lid, used for everything from chapped lips to the hinges of shoes that rub. The cold remedies occupy their own small section. NyQuil in its distinctive dark green bottle with the yellow label, present in every medicine cabinet of this decade as reliably as a phone book. Cough drops in a box that has been opened and resealed and opened again. Vicks Vapo Rub in its flat round tin, the smell of which is so entirely associated with winter illness and being taken care of that a grown adult who opens that tin 40 years later will feel, briefly and specifically, like a child with a fever being put to bed in the middle of the afternoon. The allergy medications and pain relievers are on the lower shelf, within easy reach in the night when someone is up at 2 a.m. with a headache or a child who cannot sleep. Benadryl, Tylenol, the children's liquid version of each in smaller bottles with measuring cups attached to the cap. These are the practical emergency resources of a household, gathered without drama and maintained without ceremony, replaced when they run low, the same way bread is replaced when the bag empties. What is not in the cabinet is as telling as what is. There is no sunscreen, or if there is, it is a single bottle from a summer trip to the beach, kept somewhat optimistically through the following winter. Sun protection in 1982 is not the daily practice it will become. There are no antioxidant serums, no retinol treatments, no acid exfoliants. The skincare philosophy of the era is simpler in its taxonomy, if not in its application. Cleanse, moisturize, protect from wind and cold. The cabinet reflects this. There are also no prescription bottles with her name on them in the cabinet, or if there are, they live on the very back of the highest shelf behind everything else. Private in a way that the NyQuil and the Neosporin are not private. The medicine cabinet in the 1980s is a household object, shared and practical, but it has its corners of privacy like every shared space does. the things pushed to the back that are present but not on display. She closes the cabinet door, and her own reflection returns in the mirrored surface, the bathroom behind her visible in the glass. The cabinet is fully stocked. The house is prepared for the ordinary contingencies of a family's health. This is its own form of care, the maintenance of readiness, the quiet insurance of a shelf well stocked with the things that will be needed when the night turns difficult and someone needs something, and the cabinet, as always, provides. She has had the same appointment for 11 years, every third Saturday, 2 o'clock, with Linda at the salon on Maple Street. The beauty parlor of the 1980s is not just a place to get your hair done. It is a room where women talk, where news is exchanged, where opinions are formed and expressed without much editing, and where the smell of permanent wave solution and hot rollers and hairspray blends into something that is, for many women, one of the most comforting environments they know. The salon is on the main street of the town, or 1 block off it, in a storefront with a striped awning and a neon open sign in the window that is always on during business hours and gives the sidewalk outside a faint pink glow in the late afternoon. The door opens with a bell that announces every arrival, and Linda looks up from whatever chair she is working at and says the customer's name before the door is fully closed, because she knows everyone's name and everyone's appointment and everyone's usual, and has for years. The chairs are the specific chairs of the beauty parlor, black hydraulic with chrome footrests, raised with a pump of the stylist's foot to bring the client to the right working height. The smocks are nylon, snapped at the neck, and they come in a pink or a pale blue that is faded to something softer through years of washing. She settles into the chair, and Linda snaps the smock and asks how she wants it. And the answer is some variation of the same thing it has been for 11 years, with minor adjustments for the season, or something she saw in a magazine. The magazines are part of the experience. They are stacked on a table beside the row of waiting chairs, a collection that includes every major women's publication of the era, and that is replaced regularly enough that there is always something current to look at. She has flipped through most of them already at home or at the doctor's office, but she flips through them again here, because reading a magazine in a beauty parlor chair is its own particular pleasure. Unhurried, no one needing anything from her. The pages turn slowly while Linda works. The conversation is constant, and it is the kind of conversation that happens when a group of women who see each other regularly gather in a space that belongs to them. It is warm and specific, and occasionally sharp. Linda knows who is getting divorced, and who has a son who just got into college, and whose mother-in-law is coming for Christmas and is already causing difficulty. She knows because her clients tell her, not because she asks exactly, but because the chair creates a particular intimacy, the hands in the hair, the proximity, the mirror that puts two faces side by side for 45 minutes. She tells Linda things she might not tell someone at a dinner table. Not secrets exactly, but the kind of candid observations that require a specific kind of audience, one that is close enough to understand the context and separate enough from the daily life to offer something without consequence. Linda is a good listener and an honest respondent, and she has a sense of humor that makes the 45 minutes pass quickly, even when the roller set takes longer than expected. The finished hair is revealed at the end, the smock removed, the hand mirror held up to show the back. Linda angling it so the reflection in the hand mirror aligns with the reflection in the wall mirror to give a complete view. She nods, always, because Linda has never gotten it wrong in 11 years, and she pays at the front desk and adds a tip that she calculates with the same precision she applies to everything, generous but considered. She walks out into the Saturday afternoon with fresh hair and the particular lightness of someone who has spent an hour being taken care of. And the bell rings behind her, and inside the salon, Linda is already moving to the next chair, and the appointment book on the desk already has her name written in it for the third Saturday of next month at 2 o'clock. She is sitting on the edge of the bathroom counter, and her daughter, maybe 11 or 12, is watching. Not asked to watch, just watching. The way children absorb everything in a room before they even know they are learning. This is how the rules travel from one generation to the next. The daughter has been watching for years before this particular morning, standing in the bathroom doorway in pajamas, chin resting on the doorframe, eyes following the brush and the compact and the mascara wand with the focused observation of someone studying a performance they intend one day to give themselves. She has not been invited to participate yet, not in the using of the products, though she has been allowed to hold things, to pass the eyeshadow compact when asked, to watch the cold cream applied and removed, to understand through proximity that this is a process with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that each step follows the previous one in a specific and deliberate order. The first official lesson is usually lipstick, because lipstick is the most forgiving and the most immediately satisfying, the step that produces the most visible result from the least technical skill. She hands the daughter a tube, something from the back of the drawer, a pale coral that will suit the girl's coloring without being more than she is ready for, and she talks her through the application in the mirror, both faces visible at the same time, the practiced hand and the learning hand side by side. Press lightly. Start at the bow. Follow the natural line. Press your lips together afterward. Not hard, just a press. She watches the girl try it, watches the concentration in the small face in the mirror, the tongue pressed to the corner of the mouth the way it appears whenever the girl is focused, and she does not correct the slight imprecision at the corner, because the first time is not about precision. The first time is about the feeling of it, the introduction to the ritual, the beginning of a relationship with the mirror that will last a lifetime. She teaches the cleanse next, a few weeks later, because the cleanse comes before everything else, and a daughter who is beginning to wear anything on her face needs to understand the removal as the foundation of the process. The cold cream is introduced, the circular motion explained, the tissue technique demonstrated. She watches her daughter work the cream in and watches the small face in the mirror become younger as it becomes unfinished, the bare skin below the product visible for a moment before the tissue takes everything away. The brow pencil comes later, not until the girl is older, because the brow is too easy to do wrong in ways that are difficult to correct, and she wants the foundation in place before the precision work begins. She teaches it the way she was taught, lightly and in the same direction as the hairs, the shape followed rather than invented, the arch earned rather than drawn on from scratch. She holds the girl's wrist gently to show the angle, the pressure, the pace of the stroke, and then releases it and watches her work alone. What she is transmitting is not only technique, it is the understanding that appearance is a practice, not an accident, that the face you present to the world is the result of a routine performed with attention and care, and that the routine is a form of respect for the occasion and for yourself. This is the philosophy behind every step, never stated directly, communicated entirely through the doing of it, the morning after morning of watching someone do a thing well until you understand from the inside what well means. Her own mother taught her the same way, in a bathroom that smelled of different products but operated on the same principles, and her mother's mother before that, in a bathroom smaller and simpler, but governed by the same underlying logic. The routines change with the decade. The products are replaced by newer products. The shades shift with the fashion. But the thing being handed down, the discipline and the care and the understanding that putting yourself together properly is its own form of competence, the thing does not change. She watches her daughter blend the blush with a soft brush, and something settles quietly in her chest. The line continues. It is years later now. You open a drawer or a cabinet or a cardboard box that came from someone's house, and there it is. A bottle of perfume, still half full. The stopper is slightly sticky. The label is crisp, but the cap is yellowed at the edge. You hold it up to the light and you know, before you even open it, exactly what it will smell like. Exactly whose bathroom it came from. Exactly what year it was. You open it anyway. Not because you need to confirm it, but because the opening of it is its own thing, a small private ceremony. The stopper pulled free and the first breath taken carefully. The way you approach something that you know is going to reach you somewhere deep and specific, and possibly inconvenient. And it does. The scent rises exactly as you knew it would, heavy and warm and built from the base notes of a decade that understood fragrance as permanence. And for a moment, the bathroom in 1982 is more present than the room you are standing in. This is what the beauty routines of this era left behind. And it is not what you might expect. It is not the techniques, though the techniques survive in modified form in the practices of women today. It is not the products, though some of them persist on shelves with the same labels they wore 40 years ago, updated slightly, reformulated discreetly, still recognizable. What was left behind is something harder to name, a particular quality of attention, a seriousness about the daily act of presentation that treated the ordinary Tuesday morning as something worth doing properly. The vanity table, with its organized surface and its ceramic cup of brushes, was not merely a place where cosmetics were applied. It was the place where a woman assembled herself before the day made its claims on her, and the 20 or 30 minutes she spent there each morning were the minutes that belonged entirely to her before everything else began. That kind of deliberate, private, self-directed time is harder to find in later decades. Not because women became less careful, but because the pace of life eventually made that kind of unhurried morning preparation feel like a luxury rather than a standard. The rollers wound the night before, and the aqua net applied, with both eyes closed, and the lipstick checked one final time in the visor mirror before walking into a room. These were not vanity in the shallow sense. They were the visible evidence of a standard, a relationship with effort and presentation that this generation of women inherited and practiced and passed forward through bathroom mirrors and Saturday mornings at Linda's salon. The standard asked something of them. They met it every day, and they found a kind of satisfaction in the meeting of it that is worth understanding even from a distance. The daughter who stood in the doorway watching became the woman who stood at her own vanity, and she made her own adjustments, lightened the foundation, softened the eyeshadow, eventually stopped wearing pantyhose when the world agreed it was acceptable, but kept the cold cream and the morning moisturizer and the lipstick before leaving the house, because some things settle into the body too deeply to question. The routine narrowed and simplified and modernized, but the philosophy behind it, the idea that how you present yourself is a form of care for the self and for the people you move through the world with, that philosophy survived. The perfume bottle goes back in the box, or stays on the shelf, or gets placed on a dresser where it catches the morning light through the window, and the scent drifts out very faintly on warm days. A half-presence, something between memory and air. The woman who wore it spent 30 years at a vanity table, doing something quietly serious with brushes and compact mirrors and a can of hairspray and a particular pink jar of moisturizer. And she did it every single morning without being asked, because it was what you did, and because doing it well was its own reward, and because the Tuesday morning deserved that much at least. It still does. Somewhere the coffee is on. The light is coming through the bathroom window at the right angle, and she is at the mirror taking the whole thing seriously one more time. Let's talk about what she took with her when she left the house. Not the vanity, not the full drawer of products, not the organized system of the bathroom counter. The distilled version. The makeup bag sits on the bathroom shelf or in the top of the closet or tucked into the larger handbag she carries to work. And what lives inside it is a carefully edited selection of the most essential things, the items without which the day cannot be properly managed once it begins. The bag itself is a small zippered pouch, usually in a fabric that wipes clean, sometimes a clear vinyl that lets her find things without digging, sometimes a printed cotton that she bought at a boutique or received as a gift and that she has used until the zipper pulls slightly at the corner. The size of the bag is calibrated exactly to what needs to fit inside it, not so small that things have to be forced in, not so large that finding anything requires unpacking the entire contents onto a public restroom counter. The lipstick is first. Always the lipstick, because the lipstick is the most necessary midday intervention, the one thing that can restore a face to its morning condition in under 30 seconds without a mirror if she knows the shape of her own mouth well enough, which she does. It is not necessarily the same shade she applied at the vanity this morning. It is the close enough shade, the reliable daily color that lives in the bag permanently and is replaced the moment it runs down to the last half-inch. The compact is second, a pressed powder compact with a mirror inside, small enough to sit in the palm of one hand and be used with the other. The powder a shade that matches her foundation closely enough for touch-ups, but not so precisely that it requires a separate bag for every outfit. The compact mirror is the one she uses for the lipstick check after lunch, tilted at the angle that gives her the most honest view of the lower face under restaurant lighting. A small tube of mascara lives in the bag for emergencies, different from the tube at home, a travel size or a backup of her regular brand, kept for the occasional smudge that appears under the eye in humid weather, or the rare morning she left the house before finishing the full routine and needs to complete it at her desk before anyone arrives. There is no shame in this. It is practical. She knows women who do their full face on the train, and she does not judge them. The bag also contains a small comb or a folding brush, the kind with a mirror on the back of the handle, for the hair checks that happen before a meeting or before walking into a restaurant or after a windy walk between the parking lot and the building. Wind is the enemy of a finished style in the 1980s, and the comb in the bag is the first line of defense against the damage a parking lot in November can do to a hairspray set wave. A small bottle of perfume, a purse spray, or a solid perfume in a compact form lives in the outer pocket. For midday reapplication, if the day extends into the evening unexpectedly, or if the afternoon requires a meeting that the morning's fragrance has not survived. The perfume in the bag is the same signature scent as the perfume on the vanity. Because mixing fragrances midday is not something she does, and never has been. A few loose items round out the inventory. A hairpin or two, pressed flat against the inside of the bag. A small safety pin in case a hem needs emergency management. A folded tissue, because there is always a moment that requires a folded tissue. These things have no dedicated home in the bag, but they are always there, migrated in from daily life and never quite removed. The residue of practical living that accumulates in any bag carried long enough. She checks the bag every Sunday the way she checks the car's fuel gauge on a Monday morning. A quick inventory of what is running low and what needs replacing before the week makes demands. The lipstick at its last half-inch is added to the shopping list. The compact that has hollowed at the center gets a replacement pulled from the vanity drawer. The bag is restocked and zipped and returned to its place, ready for whatever the week produces. The makeup bag is the portable version of the vanity, the kit that allows the standard to travel with her, to be maintained in airport bathrooms and office restrooms, and the mirrors above restaurant sinks, and the visor mirror of the car. It is the insurance policy of the assembled face, The acknowledgement that the day between morning and evening is long, and that things happen to a face over the course of it that require attention. She carries it without thinking about it the way she carries her keys. It belongs with her. It is part of the equipment of her day. It is late in the morning now, past the foundation and the eyeshadow and the blush and the mascara and the lipstick, past the hairspray and the perfume, and she is standing at the vanity with one final step between her and the door. The finishing powder, the setting step, the thing that takes everything she has built and seals it against the hours ahead, against the heat of the car and the air conditioning of the office and the lunch she will eat at noon and the 3 o'clock meeting that runs long. Translucent powder is the finishing layer of the 1980s face, applied over the completed makeup with a large soft brush or a velvet puff. A light veil of fine colorless powder that mattifies the foundation, reduces the shine that liquid products leave behind, and creates a surface that the day slides off of rather than into. It is the difference between a face that looks finished and a face that merely looks applied. And every woman who understands her products understands this distinction. The powder is pressed or loose. The press compact is for the bag, the touch-up tool that travels. The loose powder at home is a different animal entirely, kept in a round container with a sifter lid that releases a small controlled amount when tapped, enough to load the brush or puff without creating a cloud that settles on the bathroom counter and the dark blazer hanging on the door behind her. She taps twice, loads the brush, and taps the handle once more to knock the excess back before she brings it to her face. The application is light. The word she would use, if asked, is dust. She dusts the powder across the forehead, the nose, the chin, the areas most prone to shine over the course of a day, and she sweeps it more lightly across the cheeks where the blush lives and where too much powder would dull the color she spent time building. The under-eye area is treated with particular care because powder settling into the fine lines beneath the eye is an effect she has learned to avoid through the specific technique of applying it with a damp sponge pressed rather than swept, which deposits the product without pushing it into creases. The nose is the critical zone. The nose shines earliest and most visibly, the center panel of the face reflecting light in a way that reads as unfinished from across a room. She gives the nose an extra pass, presses the puff firmly against the bridge and the sides, and checks the result in the magnifying mirror. Matte across the nose is the standard. Anything less than matte means the powder step has not been completed properly. A setting spray is available by this decade, a fine mist applied over completed makeup to bond the layers together and extend the wear. And some women have adopted it as the final step before the bag is packed and the day begins. She keeps a small bottle of it in the cabinet, acquired on the recommendation of a friend who swore it added 3 hours to the life of a finished face. She uses it on days that require longevity, on evenings when she goes directly from the office to a dinner, on Saturday nights when the face needs to survive from 7 in the evening until midnight without a full repair. The spray is held at arm's length and misted across the closed face in a T and then a cross pattern, the way the woman at the counter demonstrated, eyes and mouth shut during the application, and she holds still for a count of 10 while the mist settles and begins to dry. The face feels slightly tighter for a moment, the product contracting lightly against the skin, and then the sensation passes, and the face feels simply done. The layers unified into a single finished surface rather than a collection of individual products stacked on top of each other. What she is doing with the powder and the setting steps is buying herself time. The face is not permanent. The morning's work will require maintenance over the course of the day. The touch-up compact and the lipstick in the bag standing ready for the interventions that noon and 3 o'clock will require. But the finishing steps extend the window. Push the first necessary touch-up from 10 in the morning to well past lunch. And on a good day with the right products and the right humidity, the face she built at 7 survives mostly intact until the evening, which is all she was ever asking of it. She caps the powder, sets the brush back in the cup, and the morning is genuinely, finally done. It is Sunday evening now. The week is a few hours away and she is in the bathroom, not getting ready to go anywhere, but getting ready for the week itself, running through the quiet maintenance rituals that will make Monday morning manageable and Tuesday morning smooth and Wednesday morning possible without undue effort. The Sunday night reset is not a single task. It is a series of small preparations, each one brief, each one removing a variable from the week ahead. The nails have already been addressed, the polish refreshed or touched up after dinner, the small chips at the tips of the index fingers repaired with a steady hand, and the top coat applied over everything to seal the repair and blend it back into the surface. The nails are done and set and will not need attention until the following Sunday, unless something breaks, which occasionally happens and is managed with the small file in the vanity drawer and a touch of polish from the bottle she keeps in the cabinet, specifically for single nail emergencies. The eyebrows are checked tonight. Checked with the magnifying mirror in the strong light of the bathroom rather than the forgiving light of the morning vanity, which is good for application, but not ideal for assessment. The strays that appeared since Wednesday are removed with the slant-tip tweezers, one at a time, plucked cleanly at the root, the area examined after each one to make sure the line is preserved and the shape is right. The skin pinkens slightly where the hair was removed, and she presses a cold, damp cloth against the area for a moment, which reduces the redness before morning. The skincare step of Sunday evening is slightly more elaborate than the weeknight version. She uses a gentle exfoliant once a week, a grainy cream or a mild acid toner that she read about in a magazine and adopted cautiously, applying it after the cleanse and before the moisturizer, buffing in small circles across the forehead and the cheeks and the chin, while avoiding the eye area and the nose where the skin is thinnest. The exfoliant removes the accumulated residue of the week's foundation and powder and environmental exposure, leaving the skin slightly brighter and more receptive to the moisturizer that follows. The hair rollers go in on Sunday night if Monday requires a particularly good result. If there is an early meeting or a presentation, or simply the knowledge that the week begins better when the hair begins right. She sits at the kitchen table with the television on in the other room, winding each roller from tip to root and securing it with the plastic pick, working methodically from the nape upward in the same sequence she always uses. The sequence so embedded in her hands that she could do it entirely in the dark. The last pick clicks into place, and she makes a cup of tea and does not think about the rollers again until morning. The outfit for Monday is chosen tonight, pulled from the closet and hung on the door. The blazer on top, and the blouse beneath it, and the skirt on a separate hanger below. The shoes pulled from the rack and placed at the base of the door. This is not obsessive preparation. This is the elimination of a Monday morning decision from a moment in the week when decisions are plentiful and time is short. The outfit is ready. One thing fewer to think about before the coffee is finished. She checks the makeup bag before bed, a quick zip and look to confirm that the lipstick is present and the compact has powder and the mascara has not dried out. She adds a new tube of mascara from the vanity drawer if the bag one is getting low, transfers it without ceremony, rezips the bag and sets it on the shelf. The bag is ready. The nails are done. The brows are shaped. The skin is treated. The hair is set. The outfit is chosen. There is a particular satisfaction in the completed Sunday reset that belongs specifically to people who take their standards seriously. The quiet pleasure of a system working the way it was designed to. Each small preparation fitting into the next like the pieces of a routine that has been practiced long enough to stop feeling like effort and start feeling simply like order. She turns off the bathroom light and the week can come. She is ready for it. And just like that, it is 1989. The bathroom light is off. The vanity is quiet. The last of the Aquanet is settled. And she has walked out into the morning the same way she has walked out into every morning for the better part of a decade, assembled and ready and entirely herself. We have spent a long time in that bathroom today. We have stood at the vanity and watched the cold cream go on and come off. We have heard the hairdryer fill the room with its particular roar and then go silent. We have smelled the permanent wave solution and the Aquanet and the perfume applied to the wrist and pressed to the throat. We have watched a woman build a face and a style and a standard morning after morning, with the kind of quiet discipline that does not announce itself, but that holds everything together from the inside. And maybe you remembered something today that you had not thought about in years. The particular pink jar on your mother's bathroom sink. The smell of her hairspray in the hallway on a Sunday morning. The sound of the roller picks being dropped one by one into the case before bed. The way she looked when she came downstairs dressed for something. The blazer with the wide shoulders. The lipstick exactly right. The perfume arriving in the room a half second before she did. Those details do not fade the way other things fade. They stay. They stay in the body before they stay in the mind, in the way a smell can return a whole year to you before you have finished the first breath of it. The 1980s beauty routine was never only about beauty. It was about the daily act of taking yourself seriously, of meeting the morning with intention, of standing at the mirror and deciding again that the effort was worth making. There is something in that worth carrying forward, whatever decade you are standing in. Not the blue eyeshadow, necessarily. Not the shoulder pads or the control-top pantyhose, or the 3 coats of mascara combed through between each pass. But the underlying philosophy. The idea that how you begin your morning shapes the morning. That the small rituals of care are not trivial. That showing up for yourself before the day asks anything of you is its own form of quiet strength. The women of this era did not always have language for that. They did not sit at the vanity and think about self-care as a concept or morning routines as a practice. They simply did what they had been taught and what they had taught themselves, and what the mirror and the decade and the women before them had collectively agreed was the standard. And in the doing of it, every single morning without exception, they built something that lasted longer than any single product on the shelf. So wherever you are watching from tonight, whether it is late and the house is quiet and you have been letting this wash over you like something warm, or whether it is early and the coffee is on and the day is still ahead of you, take a moment before you move on. Think about the woman at the vanity. Think about the 30 minutes that belonged to her alone before the world got her. Think about what it meant to meet the morning on your own terms, with a brush in your hand and a standard in your head and a perfume bottle glowing on the shelf in the morning light. If this video brought something back for you or gave you something new to think about, I would love to know. Leave a comment below and tell me where you are watching from and what part of this stayed with you. And if you have not yet subscribed, this is a gentle invitation to do that now, because there are many more mornings to visit and many more decades to walk through together, and I would like you along for all of them. The bathroom light is off, the vanity is quiet, and somewhere, on a shelf, a perfume bottle is still half full. Good night.